So a report, this was from Spartaman64 on the forum. Thank you for posting in the news section. Says TSMC reportedly will not make any extra capacity for Intel. It's funny. One of the first thoughts that entered my mind when I heard about Intel moving some of their production for future GPUs and maybe even CPUs to TSMC was like, oh, well, that's interesting because that would be on probably exactly the same node that AMD would want to use for their CPUs and GPUs. And I don't know if you guys know this, but it takes not months, but years to build up fab capacity. So, you know, you think about the kinds of projections that we have to do in our daily lives, like, how many times am I going to want to have a peanut butter and banana sandwich this week? You know, how many bananas should I get before they're all going to go bad? They're on a whole different level. They are planning, 5 years, 6 years, 10 years out in advance for, how many chips is the world going to need in the year 2025? And then they are like breaking soil on new fabs so that they will have this additional capacity. And they're doing rolling upgrades of their existing fabs to meet the need for new cutting edge manufacturing processes, while also making sure that they have enough of older, less technologically advanced fabrication processes that are more affordable for products that don't need the utmost in transistor density and low power consumption or whatever. So this is some 4D chess going on at a company like TSMC or Global Foundries or Intel, anyone who fabs anything really, Samsung. But what this, so I was like, oh, that's hilarious because TSMC is going to have a finite amount of fab space. So if Intel is taking it up, that could limit AMD's ability to supply enough chips to the market. I have a theory that AMD would not confirm for me. They actually outright denied it. I have a theory that Threadripper Pro is OEM only because either Zen 3 is right around the corner and it just doesn't make sense to ramp up an entire new line of Threadripper processors right before they're going to replace them with something that's way better, or that they just don't have enough capacity to support that product broadly in the channel for workstation DIYers or workstation system integrators, like someone like a Puget Systems, for example. So right now, those SKUs are Lenovo only. And I don't know, I can't imagine Lenovo sells, in the grand scheme of things, that many AMD workstations specifically. They're not producing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of these a month, that's for sure.
Let's say it wasn't just Lenovo. Let's say it was all OEMs. What percentage of the total sales of that chip do you think OEMs would account for?
I think it would be most. But
over 50%.
But by that logic, they should probably just only sell EPYC through OEMs, right? The vast majority of EPYC is going to gigantic volume customers, not to NCIX, who used to build 1 or 2 servers a week, compared to gaming rigs or whatever the case may be. So I just don't buy it. Why not put it on a shelf and sell it unless you either can't make enough of it and it's just going to be out of stock all the time and make people mad, or you're just worried that it doesn't make any sense to ramp it up and make it a volume part. And so you just partner with a small volume OEM to kind of act as almost like a VAR, like a solutions provider in that case. So anyway, what this suggests is that while Intel and TSMC are apparently in talks about Intel producing chips there, it could be a temporary partnership. So according to unnamed sources, TSMC doesn't consider Intel a long-term customer and is therefore unlikely to build additional fabrication capacity to meet the contracts. They want to be a long-term supplier, not a rescuer. So that's just not going to make Intel a priority for them. TSMC does already build some chipsets and FPGAs for Intel, but their 7nm capacity is already quite booked by the likes of AMD, NVIDIA, and Apple. Although some capacity should free up, this could be quite serendipitous for Intel once TSMC stops shipping to Huawei on September 14th. That's due to a U.S., I forget which branch of the administration this is.
Yeah, TSMC would have to apply. They'd have to make an application in order to sell the American parts to Huawei, and they haven't said whether or not they're going to apply or not. So they've stopped in May, and that the final chips or whatever that they're shipping to HiSilicon or Huawei will end at that time.
This is a great sort of side note. Intel has been now sued over their 7-nanometer delays. Let's see. The Hagens Berman law firm issued a press release on Friday calling for investors that were impacted by Intel's recent stock market losses to join a potential class action lawsuit. So this was apparently started by one individual investor who is super mad because she apparently bought something to the tune of 300 grand worth of Intel stock in the day or two before the stock absolutely tanked. No. So she lost like, I'm a little hazy on the numbers. It was 40 grand or 60 grand or something like that. Like
bad bet
in one day. And what they're alleging, because that can happen, and normally you can't sue over that. But what the allegation is here is that Intel must have known earlier than they let on that these 7-nanometer delays were going to be 6 to 12 months. And, this investor wouldn't have invested if they hadn't believed that 7-nanometer was on track as Intel had allegedly represented it to be.
It's kind of a weird argument. It's like we have these investor calls, these earnings calls, and clearly we prepare for them. And so if I have to prepare for this call, then that means that I know the information contained within that call before the call happens.
But if I tell you ahead of time, it's insider knowledge, and now we're both in trouble. So, like, you might just have to... So you made a bad bet. You bet that it was going to be a good call. It was a bad call, and now you salty. This is a great comment from Salgado18, actually, on the article on Tom's Hardware. This is why I think companies shouldn't go public. Random people force you to make a profit and sue you if you don't. You become accountable to an entire mass of people who don't help you do anything, don't bring anything to the company, but put a knife in your back and say, earn money or else. It's not...
Well,
now,
they do help you, though.
They do help you.
Random people do help you.
Yes
they make
and
your
no.
Stock value higher, and then the company
then you can borrow against
stock,
it.
They can or sell it.
Yep. Okay, that's fair. That's true. They do help you. But it's like a very indirect help. They don't go work on the floor of the fab slicing up, silicon ingots or whatever.
It's not that indirect. They give your company money.
Okay. Well, sort of. When they're buying on the open market, like when you're not actually issuing stock, then not really. They didn't really give you any money.
Yeah, I guess that's true.